Hello, it's Thursday. It's time to get back into the swing of things. We just killed that unit assessment, so awesome job. We're going to reflect and see our scores later on, but for now, we are just going to move right along. So today, we're moving on with a new standard. By the end of the day, you should be able to construct an argument based on evidence for how environmental and genetic factors influence the growth of organisms. Well, what does that mean? We're going to find out. You should have already done your bell ringer and you should have your guided notes pulled up so you can fill in as I go. Okay, so before we even get into it, let's talk about something real quick. Here is a picture of the GOAT and my future husband. I'm not sure he knows that yet, but it's true. LeBron James. A lot of people, when we talk about athletic ability, if you're really good at sports or whatever, is it something they were born with, or are they only that way because of all the hard work they put in? Or is it a combination of both? Same with your intelligence level. Some people think, oh, you are born with a certain amount of intelligence, you are just born smart, or you're born not so smart. Or some people think, it doesn't matter what you were born with, it matters how much work you put in. Or again, is it a combination of both? That's pretty much what we're going to be talking about today. So, with your notes pulled up, let's get into it. First blank, we have a gene is a section of DNA that has genetic information for one trait. That's something we've already talked about. This shouldn't be too new to you. Just a quick reminder. Remember, you have your DNA is that full long strand you can see over here in the picture. Again, the DNA winds up to be in the chromosome, that X shape, which is in the nucleus, but the gene is just one small section of that whole stranded DNA, and it's responsible for one trait. We've talked about traits a lot, but I don't think we've actually defined it. So what is a trait? A trait is a specific characteristic of an organism. So a trait is going to be your height, your eye color, your shoe size, anything that describes you as a person. That's your trait, and that is determined by your genes. So again, over here, all these people have different traits. So some people have a trait for a certain height or a certain skin color, hair texture, all kinds of things. Let me move myself up. So now let's actually get into some more stuff. The different forms or versions of a gene are called, this is kind of a tricky word, allele. Allele. So what does that mean? So you have your gene, and your gene is for hair color. Let's just say hair color. The different alleles or versions are going to be an allele for brown hair, or an allele for blonde hair, an allele for black hair, or maybe let's say it's eye color. You have an allele for blue eyes, an allele for brown eyes, an allele for green eyes. That's what an allele is. We're going to talk about this next part further down the road, but scientists will represent alleles using different letters. So if you look over here, we have our chromosome, and we have one allele over here represented by a capital A, and an allele for the same gene, so a different version of that gene represented with a lowercase a. So this could be, let's just stick with hair color. Let's say this is the gene for hair color. Allele with the capital A could be brown hair. Allele for a lowercase a could be blonde hair. They just assign a letter to make it much easier on us. And again, we're going to talk about that further down. Right now, that's all you really need to know. Okay. So you have a different combination of alleles because you get two chromosomes from each parent, right? So the combination of alleles, whether you get two uppercase letters, two lowercase letters, and uppercase and lowercase, depending on whatever the gene is, that combination is called a genotype. That's easy to remember because it sounds like gene. It's what's actually in your genes, what alleles you have. That is your genotype. So your genotype, your combination of the versions of those genes, is going to determine what your traits are, what you actually see. So what you actually see, or what's expressed, that is that trait's phenotype. What do I mean here? So your genotype, let's say we'll stick with hair color because that's one we've been kind of using. Let's say for hair color, you have one allele from a parent that is an uppercase B. Let's say that's for black hair. And then you get another allele, a lowercase b, from your mother. Let's say it's for brown hair. Depending on what combination of alleles you get, you're going to get a certain phenotype that's expressed. And again, that's something we're going to talk about further down the road. So if your genotype is big B, little b, your phenotype, what you actually see is black hair. Another example, maybe shoe size. You get 2 alleles for that certain gene from your parents, and you end up with big feet. So your phenotype always comes from your parents for the most part. So if you have 2 parents who are blonde, let's say, you're not going to end up with black hair. It's just that simple. Your genes come from your parents. We already knew that. Okay, so genes are not the only thing that determine your phenotype, though. An organism's environment can also affect it. So different things that happen to us in our life or even where we live can change what is expressed for our traits. Easy. Okay. So how do we know what is what? How do we know what is determined by our genes? What's determined by our environment? Which one of our traits is determined by both? We call them acquired or inherited traits. So an acquired trait, those are behaviors or skills that are learned or gained, which is what acquired means. Acquired means to gain through interaction with the environment or things that have happened to you. So these are traits that you have because of either your upbringing or your experiences. So for example, your ability to read or write. You were not born being able to read, right? If you were, that'd be crazy. You had to learn that throughout your life. Same thing with if you have dyed hair or you have hair that's not your own, or even if you just change how the texture of your hair looks. Like over here, if you get your hair relaxed, you're not born with straight hair. But your phenotype, what people see, is a little bit different because that's something that you have done to yourself. That's an experience that you have. If I dyed my hair black, I would have black hair, but my genes don't say that I should have black hair. That's something that I have acquired. Same thing with if you have a scar, you're not born with a scar. If you learn to ride a bike, you didn't come out of your mother's womb knowing how to ride a bike, right? So acquired traits are things that you are not born with. They're not something that you were born knowing how to do. So opposite of acquired traits are going to be your inherited traits. There we go, ever types. Okay. So inherited means that you got it passed down from your parents, your mom or your dad. So your inherited traits are what's actually coded into your genes. It's what's actually in your genotype. Remember, that's that combination of alleles, one from each parent. So that's going to be something that you are born with. So for example, your natural eye color. You could probably wear colored eye contacts if you really wanted to. That would be acquired though. So whatever eye color you naturally have, that's inherited. Same with dimples. This girl over here has a dimple. I have one dimple right there. You either have them or you don't have them. That is inherited. Same with your blood type. Whatever type of blood you have, you get from your parents. You were born with these. This is a hitchhiker's thumb. Same thing. If your thumb, some people's thumb bends back kind of weird. Mine doesn't. So that's also inherited. So since these traits are coded into your DNA, whatever traits you have that are inherited, they can be passed down to the next generation. So if you had a child, that child could potentially have that same inherited trait. Okay? Your acquired traits aren't necessarily passed down. They can be taught. You can teach your future kid how to ride a bike or how to read, but they're not naturally born being able to do that. Okay. Last slide here. Some traits can be a combination of both. So what do I mean by that? One good example is skin color. This is the perfect example. You are obviously born with a certain skin tone. We knew that. However, where you live or the amount of time you spend in the sun can change that. So if it's summertime and you're out in the sun for a significant amount of time, you'll notice that your skin can get a little bit darker. Same thing if you stuck inside all day with your hood up, you saw no sunlight ever, your skin tone would fade a little bit. That's just how it works. Same thing with athletic build or ability. This kind of ties back to what we were talking about with LeBron. You are naturally going to grow to be a certain height because of your parents. If you had two parents that were 6'5", you're probably going to be a tall person once you're fully grown. If you had two parents who were like 5'1", you're probably not going to grow up to be 6'5". I hate to break it to you. But I'm keeping that. But if you don't ever work out, if you don't eat healthily, it doesn't matter if you're 6'5", you're probably not going to be that athletic. You have to take what you're naturally given with and put into work to make yourself a great athlete. Like if LeBron James never practiced basketball, he's not going to be a good basketball player. He wasn't born naturally knowing how to dunk. He had to practice that and practice that. But the genes that he has gave him a little bit of an edge. He's already 6'8". He kind of has that advantage. So it's a combination of both. Same with intelligence level, it's a little bit of both. So if you have two parents who are super, super, super smart, you might have a little bit more of a natural ability to catch on to things. However, if you never actually sat down and learned how to read, it's kind of pointless. Okay, so tomorrow we are going to get a little bit of practice identifying the differences between acquired and inherited traits. I don't think this is anything too difficult, so we should be good. But if you have any questions at all, hit me up. It's what I'm here for.